You've just seen the trailer for Sword of Atlas. Now let's jump to some of the developers to go over a quick razor pitch and some more information about the game.
All right, Joe, do you want to introduce us to Sword of Atlas quickly?
Yeah, love to. Sword of Atlas is a tactical role-playing game that combines grid-based combat system with active turn-meter combat. So we take frenetic strategy, real-time action, and a character-driven story and intersect them to create a unique gaming experience where you control the fate of your party.
And Anne, I think you were the first person to pitch this game. Do you want to kind of walk through what your original vision was for it and if it's changed at all?
So the way I had pitched it was as a cross between Fire Emblem, so taking the grid-based map from Fire Emblem and then smushing it together with the active time battle meter from Final Fantasy. I think I chose those two games specifically because I thought like most people might have some level of familiarity with them. I think if I just started talking about like grid-based meter and time meters and that kind of stuff, no one would really get it.
Do any of you remember the exact timeline? It can walk us through, because the team at one point collapsed and then was revived.
Yeah, I have a pretty vivid memory of that.
Go for it, Joe.
Yeah. So we did the first round of pitches. They chose, I believe it was 10 games to go through from that. We were one of those 10 games. There were 6 of us on the team at the time. We had 3 weeks to make a prototype for the game. We pitched that prototype, and then the teams were going to get cut in half again. So 5 games were going to move on from those 10. Unfortunately for us, we lost that vote by 1. So we were 1 vote shy. We were the 6th team. And so we all had a very somber walk back to the lab, did not speak to each other. And then about 2 hours later, Anne and I were essentially like, yeah, that's not going to work. And we realized we still had 6 people on our team who wanted to do the game. We had 2 other members, Renee and Jonah, joined us very quickly after. And so we went up to the professors and we were like, hey, we care a lot about this game. Let us make it. And they were kind enough to let us do it. And so we managed to kind of fight through the little round of pitches for not being a game to eventually collecting enough numbers to become the largest of the prototype games. So
the largest team of the cohort, yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the early prototyping time like?
Yeah. So most of our early prototype was asking a ton of questions because we spent the first probably 2 weeks. The week and a half of the 2-week prototype was just trying to figure out what we were doing. It was just a ton of experimenting and trying to figure out how to do this.
Something that was interesting about this prototype was we knew that we weren't going to be able to really captivate exactly what the experience at the end would be like in the 2 or 3 weeks we had. So we really spent a lot of time trying to show what it could grow into and like what that could be. We were also kind of prepared just to switch between engines, between Unity or Unreal when we kind of got further to that point and understanding it, because both engines basically don't have any kind of grid system built into it besides something like RPG Maker is really the only thing out there that really kind of supports that, and we were looking for a little bit higher complexity as far as technicality goes.
Maybe we should have just used RPG Maker.
Maybe we should have.
Because it hasn't been easy.
No, definitely not. We didn't have much of anything to actually show till like maybe a couple weeks ago, and then it kind of all just came together, and then there was like a game, an alpha version of what we were looking to do, which is really cool.
That was less than a month ago.
Yeah.
That came together like November 15th.
Yeah.
That's when we had a game for the first time.
Why do you think our project especially took so long to kind of finally come together?
Once we had the frameworks done like we do now, it's really easy to make more skills, more maps, but basically everything besides that had to be built from the ground up, either in C++ or just very structured blueprints. And now that we have that, we can just kind of grow very quickly from there, which I'm excited to do moving into the next semester.
Going back a little bit to that question you asked before about what you felt took us so long to get to where we are now, just all the dependent systems, all of it coming together. And that was like what I was preaching in our prototype, because we only had 2 weeks. And I was one of the voices saying, you know, just keep going, working on this. As soon as you see it all together, you'll understand that like there's something here that we can work on. But until then, it's going to be white box and it's going to be spreadsheets. You know, it's going to be numbers behind the scenes that don't really make sense. But when we first hit that big milestone where you could see the game and it was playable, we all just kind of looked at each other and was like, oh, there's definitely something here.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what the process of designing the narrative of Sword of Atlas has been like?
It really started super small and we've just expanded outward kind of in a spider web, making sure that we're keeping this web cut and trimmed to remain in scope for what we have in mind for the game. It's a character-driven story in which we, as writers, sit down and create characters that these players are going to interact with multiple times during this play session and eventually hopefully spark them to play it again. But making sure that they're both interactable and friendly enough, or at least interesting enough, that the players grow to care about them. Keeping that front and center is something that we've really been striving towards that has influenced a lot of decisions moving forward.
Well, let's step back for just a moment and talk about core gameplay. What are some of the kind of core actions a player has when interacting with these playable characters?
You have really three main options in front of you. One is to move your character to position them the way you want in battle. The second is just basic attack and deal damage to another enemy. And the third, different unique skills that each of them have that really define their own roles on the battlefield. So the player is really going to be choosing between those three main options as battle goes on, and they'll encounter all different scenarios where each are equally valuable. I think one of the coolest things about the sort of commonalities between Final Fantasy and Fire Emblem is the fact that each character feels really, really different to use, that they all have their own special skill sets that really define them as a character. So that was something we really want to keep concurrent in our game as well and sort of use as inspiration.
We wanted each of these enemies to have a kind of defined role, kind of like the player characters, right? We wanted a more beefy bruiser type and then a ranged mage caster. But as we iterated and designed more, we decided to split a lot of these up. Just like the player characters have a healer and a mage and a melee user, so do the enemies, and they kind of support and play off of each other. The enemies actually utilize a lot from the player character side, so a lot of the work that Will's team with systems does, we're using on the encounter side as well. We use the exact same skill system for the enemies, and we actually use a lot of that same grid movement as well.
So what has building the AI been like for you?
Yeah, so with Unreal Engine, typically you use what's called a nav mesh. Because we're using a grid, I actually basically had to rebuild a lot of their AI movement kind of from scratch. You know, Nate, our engineer that made the grid, helped me a lot with this, but it really is kind of their own system and how they move and how they act and interact with the player characters.
Thanks everyone for your time and attention. We're super excited to show you everything we have coming your way soon, and we want for you to be a part of it. Follow the link on the screen to visit our itch page, to play our game, and to fill out our playtest survey. If you leave your name, we'll get you added to the credits as a thank you for helping out the team.